To set up the game area, the cards will first be placed out. The treasure cards will be placed into separate face-up stacks. The treasure cards available are copper, silver, and gold. The victory cards are also placed out near the treasure cards. The estate, duchy, and province are the basic cards used in every game. Players can also choose to use the gardens cards as another victory card. But for beginners, it is best to start with just the main three. In a 3 or 4 player game, 12 of each of these cards will be placed face up. In a 2-player game, only 8 of each of the victory cards will be placed face up in piles. The curse cards are also placed out for every game, even though they may not necessarily be used in a game. For a 2-player game, place out 10 curse cards. For 3 players, place out 20 cards. And for 4 players, place out 30 cards. The trash card will also be placed somewhere near all the rest of the cards. Next, 10 kingdom card types will be chosen. There are several ways the kingdom cards can be chosen. There are 5 recommended sets found in the rulebook. These can also be found in the cheat sheet section of Board Simple. Advanced players can also choose to select their kingdom cards randomly. To do this, they will use the randomizer cards, which are placed in this slot of the box. The randomizer cards can be easily recognized from the rest of the cards because they have a blue border around the card instead of a tan border. They will shuffle the randomizer cards and flip up the top 10 cards. Then they will locate the corresponding card in the box, and those will be the cards that they play with. For a player's first few games, the following cards are recommended: Cellar, Moat, Village, Workshop, Woodcutter, Smithy, Remodel, Militia, Market, and Mine. The cards will be placed out on the table in piles. 10 cards should be in each pile. After the game area is set up, each player will set up their individual player area. To set up each player's area, each player will be given 7 copper cards and 3 estate cards. They will shuffle these cards together and place them face down into their deck. They will then draw the top 5 cards of their deck. The 5 cards that they drew will now become their hand. After each player has set up their deck and their hand, they will now choose a starting player and begin playing the game, starting with Phase 1, the action phase. During the action phase, players decide whether or not to play one action card from their hand. Action cards always say action at the bottom. During the first 2 rounds of the game, players will not have any actions in their hand, so they will skip this phase. If a player decides to play an action card, they will take the card from their hand and lay it face up in their player area. They announce the name of the card that they are playing and read the instructions on the card from top to bottom. A player does not have to be able to complete all of the instructions on the card, but they must complete as much as they can. If the card they play allows them to play another action, they must complete the first action they played before doing the second action. Let's take a look at the individual actions of the recommended beginner kingdom cards. If a player uses the Cellar card during their turn, they choose one additional action to play and will place that card next to the Cellar card. The other ability of a Cellar card is it allows a player to choose any number of cards from their hand and discard them to their discard pile. After discarding the cards from their hand, they will take the same number of cards from their draw pile and add them to their hand. If their deck runs out while they are drawing, they will shuffle their discard pile and form a new deck. After finishing these conditions of the Cellar card, they can now move on to their second action card they played. A player that uses the Market first draws one card from their deck and adds it to their hand. They can then play one additional action card and can complete the requirements of the second action card they placed. The +1 buy and the coin symbol are both used in the buy phase, so these will be explained in the buy phase video. The militia card is a special type of action. It is an attack action. This type of action has a negative effect on all other players of the game, unless they have a reaction card, which will be explained next. The militia requires all other players to discard down to 3 cards in their hand. They may choose the cards that they discard, and if they already have 3 or fewer cards in their hand, they do not discard anything. The militia card also has a special buy phase ability, which will be explained later. The moat has 2 different roles that it can play. It can either be used as an action card or a reaction card. If a player uses the moat as an action card during their action phase, they draw 2 cards from their deck to add to their hand. The reaction ability of a moat card is that if another player plays a militia card, a player can reveal the moat card from their hand, which means show it to all other players, and then they place it back into their hand. When they do this, they are not affected by the attack action. The mine card allows a player to choose 1 treasure card from their hand and trash it, which means placing it on top of the trash card in the trash pile. Trashing can be useful to get cards that you do not want out of your deck. After trashing their chosen treasure card, they look to the bottom left-hand corner of the card they trashed to find its cost. They may then gain a treasure card from the supply that costs up to 3 more than the card they trashed. So trashing a copper allows them to take a silver, and trashing a silver allows them to take a gold. The treasure card they gained is placed into their hand, not into their discard pile. The remodel action allows a player to place 1 card of those remaining in their hand into the trash pile. They look to the bottom left-hand corner of the card they just trashed to find the cost of the card. Then they gain a card from the supply costing up to 2 more than the cost of the card they trashed. The card a player can choose to take can be either one of the kingdom cards, a treasure card, a victory card, or even a curse card. The card they gain is placed into their discard pile. The smithy allows a player to draw 3 cards from their deck and place them in their hand. The village allows a player to take 1 card from their deck and add it to their hand. They are then allowed to play 2 more action cards from their hand, if they are able. The additional action cards will be completed 1 at a time. The woodcutter gives special abilities to a player during their buy phase. These will be explained in the buy phase video. The workshop allows a player to take any 1 card from the supply that costs up to 4. The card a player can choose to take with the workshop action can be either one of the kingdom cards, a treasure card, a victory card, or even a curse card, as long as the cost of the card is less than or equal to 4. And the card they take is immediately placed in their discard pile. Any action cards a player uses during their action phase will remain in their player area, and that player will move into phase 2, the buy phase. After a player finishes the action phase, they move into the buy phase. During this phase, a player is able to buy cards from the supply. To start this phase, it is easiest if a player looks at their remaining hand cards and places their treasure cards face up in front of them. Next, they will count up the value of all the treasure cards they placed. The value of the treasure card is found in the center, so this player has treasure cards with a value of 5. They will then look at the action cards they played during their action phase. This player was able to play 3 action cards. They will look for any coin symbols on their cards and add the value in the coin to their total amount of treasure cards. So this player would add 2 for this card and 2 for this card. So now, instead of having a total value of treasure cards of 5, they have a total value of 9, with their 2 additional points from this and 2 from this. Each player is always allowed to buy one card during their buy phase. But if they have action cards that give them additional buys, they can buy more than one card. For instance, this player has played 2 cards that each give them +1 buy. So now this player has a total of 3 buys and can buy 3 cards. During the buy phase, a player is allowed to buy any combination of kingdom cards, treasure cards, victory cards, or even curse cards if they choose. The cost of a card is found in the bottom left-hand corner. Some cards do not have a cost, such as the copper card, but a player must still use one of their buys to acquire this card. It should be noted that players should be careful not to buy victory cards too early in the game, since victory cards only have value at the end of the game. A player does not have to buy anything during their buy phase, and if they have multiple buys, they do not have to use all of their buys. The cards a player purchases during their buy phase are immediately placed into that player's discard pile, not into their hand. After deciding whether or not to purchase cards, the player moves into Phase 3, the cleanup phase. The cleanup phase is a very short phase of the game. This phase consists of the active player placing all of their action cards they placed during Phase 1 into the discard pile. They also place any treasure cards they used during the buy phase into the discard pile. Finally, if that player had any cards left in their hand at the end of their turn, they would also place those in the discard pile and draw a new hand of 5 cards. If their deck runs out while they are drawing, they shuffle their discard pile and place it face down as their new deck and continue drawing. The next player in clockwise order now starts their turn, beginning at Phase 1. The game ends at the end of any player's turn when either of the 2 following conditions occur. If the supply of provinces runs out, or if 3 of the piles of kingdom cards run out. When the game ends, final scoring occurs. To do the final scoring, players combine the cards from their deck with those in their discard pile. They look through their cards and separate out their green victory cards from the rest of their cards. When they've separated out all of the victory cards, they count up the value of their cards. The points they score for each victory card are found in the center. If the game is being played with the extra victory card, which is the Gardens, they gain 1 point for every 10 cards in their deck, rounded down. So to score a Gardens card, the player would first count all of their cards in their entire deck, including all of their Garden cards. Then they would round that number down to the nearest 10 to find out how much each of their Garden cards is worth. For instance, if this player had 24 cards in their deck, including their Garden cards would be worth 2 points each. The player who ends the game with the most points is the winner. If there is a tie, the tiebreaker is the player who had the least turns during the game, and if they are still tied, the players share the victory.